Hello, my name is Niall Enright. I'd like to welcome you to this introduction to MACC Builder Pro. I've double-clicked on the MACC Builder Pro executable and the application has opened up on the Welcome tab. And as you can see, here on the left-hand side is an introduction as to what a marginal abatement cost curve is. Before I get into details about MACC Builder Pro, let's talk a little bit about what a MACC curve is. A MACC curve is nothing more than an Excel graph. It's an unusual graph though. It looks like a bar chart, but the bars are of variable widths. And in fact, what it's showing on the vertical axis is the net cost saving, or the net cost, of a range of different projects. This MACC chart has 6 projects as it happens. On the left hand side here, project number 1 is the one that saves us the most money, and that money is shown as euros per kilogram of CO2 per year. So each year this project will reduce our operating cost by about 80 euros. Now the horizontal axis shows us the total cumulative amount of CO2 that a given project will save. So although project number 1 is very attractive, actually it's project number 3 that's the one that's having the biggest impact, because it's got the widest horizontal width, if you want. And that's really all a MACC curve is a special form of chart. But because Excel isn't able to create variable width bar charts, we've had to design MACC Builder Pro. So turning to the right hand side, there's a few more things I'd like to tell you about MACC Builder Pro. First of all, throughout the application are a range of buttons. These buttons are very simple. You just press them and they'll take you to the relevant action that you have chosen. And please remember that throughout MACC Builder Pro, cells that are yellow are editable, whereas blue cells are calculated, and so you won't be able to change the contents. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you to the Configure MACC sheet, which will enable us to look at a MACC chart and change its appearance. Okay, so now we've been moved to the tab marked MACC, and as you can see in the center of this page we have our marginal abatement cost curve, in this case for the Highland plant. You can see we have our chart and some titles, some labels of various different kinds, and what we're going to show you is how through changing some of these cells here in yellow you can actually modify the appearance of this chart. So in very simple terms, for example, I could change the title, so I'll call it Niall's New MACC, and you can see it just updates that automatically, and this is precisely the way that MACC Builder Pro is designed to work. So I could, for example, change the currency as well if I wanted to. Now one of the things as you do going through these elements is you can actually see that there's a input hint that's available to you. Now those input hints are extremely useful when you're first starting to use MACC Builder Pro, but after you've become familiar with the interface they can become a little bit irritating. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to remove them and get rid of them. So you can see now those input hints have disappeared. So here it's telling me that our units of abatement are tons of CO2 on the horizontal axis, and then the vertical axis is euros per ton of CO2 saving or cost related to each one of these 12 different projects that I've got in my MACC. So what sorts of things can we do with these options around here? Well, one of the ones I can do, for example, is to change the rounding of the X value axis numbers, so you can see that those numbers have changed. And I can also change their orientation and even their position, so I can put them below the line if I wanted to, and in that way I can very easily get to a labeling arrangement that suits my needs. So I'll put them back above. I think it looks a bit nicer there, and I'll put that rounding down to the nearest 20 tons of CO2, so it gives a nice even spaced horizontal label there. I can also change the project labels, which are shown here as the numbers 1 to 12, and obviously the corresponding table below. But if I prefer to change that to, for example, a letter, I could do that as well, and you can see now I've gone from A through to L. This part of the MACC, the individual labels, is not refreshed every time unless I press the Rebuild MACC. So if I press that button there, you'll notice now that that's going to come through in a second, and I'll have my letters A to L. Now, perhaps I'm not happy with one of the positions of the individual labels, and what I can do is, in typical Excel fashion, is I can just take that label and I can move it slightly. Okay, so I can pull that letter A out, and I can put that letter B a little bit closer to where the chart bar is, and you can see I can adjust that. So in addition to all of the options that you have in these yellow boxes around the MACC curve, you also have the opportunity to use all of Excel's inbuilt charting functions, so you can change the appearance of the graph directly from the Excel interface, although in many ways using these options around the MACC chart is much more reliable and will allow you to get a more consistent result. One of the things that I often want to show on a MACC chart is the point at which the projects go from being net cost saving to actually starting to have a positive cost, and that's what's called the intercept here. So if I wanted to display that on the graph, I simply choose intercept, and MACC Builder Pro will go off and it will create that intercept for me. And it's at the value of 1,260 tons. So that's how much abatement of CO2 I could achieve while still having positive savings, or negative cost if you will, from that basket of projects. I'm a little concerned about how close that is to my title, so I can actually change the height of that quite easily by just changing the percentage it is of the overall vertical axis. It's quite a nice little feature there. Other aspects of what I can include or not in the MACC curve are, for example, associated with each individual project list. I could include some additional bits of information. So what the capital cost of that project is, for example, what the payback is, or what the net present value is. So let's include net present value, and we'll go ahead and rebuild our MACC, and you can see the net present value has appeared against each one of those projects. So again, a neat feature. You have a choice of up to 4 individual additional elements of information that you can include associated with each individual project in your MACC. You can also introduce other data into your MACC chart. So for example, if I'm interested in what the total CO2 of my entire basket of projects is, I can include that in my graph, the total capital cost for all of them, that intercept number of 1260 I can also include, and how much it costs to get me to that intercept. And again, I have a range of different statistics that I can introduce, and so when I press that rebuild MACC button, MACC Builder Pro will go off and grab those bits of information and again put them at the bottom of the chart here for me. So very flexible, very adaptable, lots of options I haven't shown you just yet, but as you can see, you can get the flavor of how MACC Builder Pro enables you to produce the output that suits your needs. So the next thing I want to show you is how you can actually enter data for an individual MACC, or for that matter, how you can remove data for a project. So if I go into this Edit MACC Data option here, I'm taken to my data entry screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to eliminate one of my projects from my MACC list. So going back to my MACC list, you can see this project C, which is a project with a huge impact. Maybe I don't want to display that on my MACC curve at the moment. Perhaps I'm uncertain about the numbers, perhaps I want to validate that a little bit further. So just simply go into Edit MACC Data. I've got the project details here, and I just simply drop down this box here that says Exclude. It's highlighted in red now. So popping back to the MACC screen, you'll see that that MACC chart will get redrawn in a moment, and you see it's eliminated now, and I only have 11 projects on my list rather than the 12 I had a moment ago. Okay, let's go back into that Edit MACC Data. I'm going to include that project again, so not exclude it, so to speak. But I'm also going to enter another project. So I'm going to call this project, I don't know, Compressed Air Leak Detection. Okay, and let's imagine I'm going to spend $5,000 maybe on a ultrasonic leak detector. It's going to save me $20,000 a year, so it's a great project, so I'm glad to get that in there. And in terms of the amount of CO2 it'll save, let's see, $20,000, 200,000 kilowatt hours, about half a kilo per kilowatt hour, so that's going to be about 100 tons of CO2, and the project lifetime is going to have a 10-year life. That's the life of the handheld compressed air leak detector device that I'm going to use. And in fact, it's just those 5 pieces of information that I need to to create a new project on my Mac. It's very, very efficient in terms of the amount of data that you have to provide MACC Builder Pro. There are some additional bits of information though that I could usefully add, and these are called the categories, and I'll show you in a moment how you set categories up. But at the moment you can just see that there's a drop down list of a range of different categories, so I'll choose that compressed air category. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. Okay, the plant is in Europe, so I'll just select Europe from my list, and now I've got a status for my project, which might be whether it's feasible, whether the capital has been requested, or whether it's been approved. So let's just say that this project has been approved. Okay, so popping back to my marginal abatement cost curve, MACC Builder Pro will redraw my chart for me, and you can see I've actually got compressed air leak detection here. Forgive the typo. That's a great project, actually showing a very significant cost saving, although the amount of CO2 reduction is only at 100 tons, isn't as great as say this project D here, now the steam line control line valve. So you can see that MACC Builder Pro will easily add projects to my chart, and in fact in MACC Builder Pro you can have up to 100 projects, at which point they become such small vertical slices that the idea of presenting them in a Mac is probably not sensible anyhow. A few things I'd like to point out of this chart is you can actually see here that I've got the projects categorized as their status of approval. So this one has been signed off, which is my compressed air leak detection. Some of these other projects here are feasible but are awaiting approval, and so forth. So it's this ability to show additional categories on my Mac chart that is one of the strengths of MACC Builder Pro. And if I take you to this option here called Setup Categories, you'll be able to see the sorts of range of things that can be done with categories. So first of all, we had those technology categories which I showed you about a moment ago, and one of the technologies is called Compare. I don't like the way that it's been named here, so I'm just going to rename it as compressed air. So you can see that's a bit better. You can see I've also got other categories like the region that the project's in, or the status of approval, stage of approval I should say, and I can edit any one of these categories. I can add additional elements to those categories. MACC Builder Pro enables me to create my own categories entirely as I wish. So for example, I might, instead of region, actually want to have the, I don't know, the division in the company which the project belongs. I also have a number of other categories are available to me, and these are what we call threshold categories. So here for example I've got a payback, so whether it's an immediate payback, so that means if it's 0 months to achieve savings it'd be called immediate, less than 6 months is fast, less than 24 is good, 36 reasonable, 60 is poor, and so on and so forth. Or my CapEx approval levels, so any projects over $10,000 have to go to the department level. Any projects over $100,000 have to go to the site manager level, and I can set these thresholds to suit my particular requirements. So let's go back to the Mac chart and see what we can do with these categories. Well, the categories are all controlled from the left hand side here. So you see at the moment I have the category of status. Okay, now how about the approval band? So that would be interesting to see, because that first project of mine was a $5,000 project, and you can actually see that it doesn't require approval. It's only $5,000. So now I've got the different levels. These projects here, for example, require approval at department level, but actually this big project here, Project M, would require main board approval. Well, on the subject of different categories, you can actually see that the categories are separated out here using different colors, and in this case I've got a range of different colors in the blue palette, and in fact that's determined by the style that I've chosen. And here you can see it's a style called Blues 12, which means it's generally blue, and there are 12 different individual categories which each have different colors. There's a whole range of different styles available within MACC Builder Pro. In fact, you can have up to 20 individual styles. So for example, I could choose this red, green, 3 pastel. So to see what that looks like, and MACC Builder Pro redraws that graph, and you can see in these quite nice pastel-y sort of colors. Other alternative styles might include, for example, here the rainbow style. That's got a much broader palette of colors, ranging from purple to quite bright orange. Not my particular style. How about this style 2 here? That is a different sort of palette altogether. Feels a bit like a sort of a 1950s muted palette. Now all of these styles are entirely editable, so I can choose this edit current style dialog, and what it will do is it will enable me to edit every single element of the style that I want, starting of course with the color, where I can choose a color palette, or I can choose colors from a defined custom color, and I can change those colors at will. So you can see, very easy to change individual colors, or I can alter the fonts, choose different font faces or different font colors, and MACC Builder Pro will enable me to save that as a full style set. So if I press that button, you'll see we go back in there, and that initial color on my list, the first one, it appears in bright yellow. So very flexible, very adaptable, and once I get the MACC graph to exactly the style that I want, obviously I've set my corporate colors up and I can reuse those at any time, but maybe there's a set of colors that I might want to use for a particular client as well, and I can simply save those all as a style set, which will save a huge amount of effort in the future. So one of the things I might want to do now is to copy that MACC chart to the clipboard, and then I can move over to a Word document, just a blank document there, and paste that MACC chart into that document, as you can see. So very, very easy to do, to copy and paste, or I can send that chart directly to Word as well by pressing my copy to Word button. So getting your MACC out of MACC Builder Pro is very, very easy. Other things that you can do, once you've designed your MACC and completed your MACC, you can actually save that MACC for future use, and so I can save it to a sheet. So it's offering me a save name called Saved One. I'll call it Niles MACC number 1. Okay, so just give it a name that I'll remember, and now what it will do is it'll go off and it will actually copy that to a new sheet for me called Niles MACC number 1. I've got a copy of the image, the snapshot, which I can reuse anytime that I want, just using the cut and copy and paste button, but I've also got all of the settings that I've used previously in my MACC saved for posterity. And in fact, this is the way that in the MACC Builder Pro I can actually use some of my example data. So here I've got a previous MACC that I'd saved in a variety of different styles of MACC that are available to me. Here's one with a list of projects and all of their technologies. So if I wanted to use that saved data, I can simply just press that button. It's warning me that I'm going to overwrite my existing MACC, and if I want to go ahead and do that, I just go and say yes, and then I get taken back to my MACC chart. And as you can see, it's exactly as I'd saved it previously, with all of these projects, and in this case it's illustrating a MACC that's based on payback, so a variance from payback of 24 months. So effectively all of those projects which have a payback of less than 24 months are shown below the axis here, and those are the ones that maybe meet the approval threshold of my organization. Okay, I'm going to stop at this point. We spent about 20 minutes looking at MACC Builder Pro. There's a huge range of other things that you can do, such as display internal rates of return. You can modify the MACCs and the statistics and the outputs even further. But I'll just leave you with this demonstration, and hopefully that's given you a taste of MACC Builder Pro, and it's a tool that you'll find useful in your work on energy efficiency or resource efficiency. Thank you very much.